Okay, so here's this photo that I took on a trip to Ireland just off of my iPhone. And I think it's a really good example of obviously how great cell phone photography has become, like the power of just using your cell phone. Anytime you get something off of the cell phone, it could always stand for some color correction just to punch things up a little bit. First though, if I wanted to crop this is I go up to the crop area and I start cropping away. You can see the crop tool in Photoshop breaks things down to that rule of thirds thing, so I can really pay attention to where things are. And often, say if I crop the image here, like if I put, just for instance, if I crop this image and put the eye in an intersecting part of the rule of thirds, that sometimes helps to have like an area of interest intersecting into that. So I'm just going to try that, just show you that. Maybe it made no difference, maybe it made a difference, but Photoshop, the crop, there's a reason that they made the crop tool default to the rule of thirds, and it's help you to align things and do little things like that. Anytime I open a photo, I always make a duplicate copy of the background layer by dragging it down here into the new layer icon. So if I get too far ahead, I've always got the original intact. I have spoken about destructive and non-destructive editing techniques. So Photoshop has an area where you can go under image and make the adjustments, and you can make all the adjustments you want to your image right under here under image. But I don't recommend that because it's destructive editing. The minute I click levels on here, here's my histogram and my dynamic range, and I can make those adjustments, but it's darkening the actual layer. And every time I do an adjustment to the actual layer, it degrades the image quality. And as I said, it's not going to matter for screen, but if you're going to print something poster size, you're going to really want to practice your non-destructive editing techniques in Photoshop. So I'm going to cancel out of there. What I recommend, rather than going up here and making your adjustments, is Photoshop in the layers palette has given you this little icon down here. It's called layer adjustments. If I click on that, it gives me all the adjustments. I do not like brightness and contrast. I'm going to show you why. You click on brightness and contrast. It just gives you two scales. Obviously brightness and contrast. It doesn't give you a whole lot of control. And sometimes, depending on the image, it can really blow the highlights out, meaning the highlights can become too bright, and it doesn't really give you much gray in between the lights and the darks. So I'm turning this layer off here. I always default to levels. I think it's way more powerful and it makes your photos look better because it gives you dark, gray, and white. It gives you three options, and that is a ton more than brightness and contrast gives you. Moving those around, it just gives you, as I said, a little more flexibility in what you're doing with the image here. You can change the kind of color range of it. You can change from RGB, and you can go into the reds. And if you need to, you can kind of add a little bit more reds there into the levels. So the levels is very powerful. I really like it and enjoy it, and think it's much better than brightness and contrast. Also, when these things pop into their layers, if I turn the eyeball off, you can see, well, I really like what's going on down here. It's pulling a lot of details. The sky's getting washed away. Okay, so the thing about being levels or the adjustment layers being in their own layer, if you wanted to maintain the sky, you can remove some of the adjustment layer from that area. This little white area is called a mask. And how masking, see layer mask as it hovered over there, the layer mask thumbnail popped up. The way masking works is I put my foreground on black, I go to my brush tool, I'm going to adjust the brush size. The long way to do is up here. Beside the P key there are brackets. Those are the fast keys to increase and decrease your brush size. Now I'm going to put the brush up to an opacity of 100% and just click and drag that along the sky, and you can see over here the block that has been added. So I've removed that part of the levels image so that I can get the sky back up here. What I really like about layer masking is it's non-destructive editing. So the levels is in its own layer. It hasn't actually touched the image, so I haven't degraded the image at all. It's in its own layer. And I can mask or erase parts away. Again, I just put the foreground on black, went to the brush tool, and erase the sky. If I want to get that back, all I have to do is reverse that, switch the foreground to white, and then it reverses what I've done. As you can see over here, it's made that white again. But In essence, what I really want to do is erase that so I can have the sky back. So now what if I wanted to darken the sky? So I'm going to throw on another levels layer down here. And I'm just going to focus on the sky, not worry about the horse, keeping in mind that I can mask stuff away. So let's try just darkening that sky. There we go, look at that. Look at that sky popping now. That's good. I can't see the horse at all, but I can see the sky. Because I know that I can mask the rest away, foregrounds on black. Go to my brush, 100% opacity. Let's make that brush size really big. Bracket key, side the P key, bam. Look at that. I've erased that part of the image away. The power of adjustment layers when you're using Photoshop. I'm going to now decrease that brush size. And then I'm going to get rid of this part. Now I find what's really handy, if I go to the zoom tool, I'm going to zoom in here on the image, go to the hand tool, move that around, go back to my brush tool, decrease the size, and now I have much more control over what I'm doing when I'm zoomed in.
Forward.
On a side note, go down here to the smudge tool. I think the strength of the smudge tool is good around 30%. And I can actually smudge the mask around to sort of feather the mask out and make the transitions a little bit smoother. So there's a little tip for you. You can actually smudge the mask, and then that will help you transition between sections.
Forward.
The levels just for the sky, and made levels just for the horse. And now I can go down here into the layer styles. I like going to hue saturation. I think you can increase and decrease the saturation. In this case, I'm going to increase the saturation. I think that'll look a lot better. That's looking really good. And another little one that I like down here is photo filter. If I want to warm this image up or cool it off, that cooling filter worked with the sky. I don't want the horse cool. So again, on the mask, foregrounds on black on the brush, crank that opacity up to 100. Let's erase the cooling filter on the horse. So I can keep the horse warmer. Keep the cooling filter only on the sky. You'll get the point. There you go. And look at that, sky punches up because it's got a little bit of blue in it now. So now I'm going to throw on another photo filter. I'm going to find a warming one I like just for the horse. Crank that up. Maybe that's too much, but you're getting the point. There's the mask. Foregrounds on black. Brush. Opacity 100. Let's erase the sky. So the sky, I can have some sort of complementary colors going on. I've got the horse tinted in yellow. I've got the sky tinted in blue. And that's adding a lot of dynamic stuff to the photograph. I really like what's going on there. So I'm going to shift select all these layers. I'm holding down the shift key. Select all those. Right click. I'm going to merge those layers together. Then, just for interest, I'm going to click the eyeball off of my new image and look at the previous one. So I go from 0 to hero. That's what I call that. So now I'm going to make another layer, a duplicate layer of that photo. Right here, there's a sponge, burn, dodge. Dodge lightens area, burn darkens areas. So I'm going to go to the burn tool. Say if I want to add some focal point interest. I really want to focus on the horse's head. So I'm going to increase the size of my burn tool. I want to take this off of shadows and go to mid-tones. I think anything around 30% on the smudge, the dodge, and the burn tool will work really well. That's my tip. Then I'm going to start burning the edge here. And you can see it's darkening it. And I'm going to darken actually the edge all the way around to sort of create like a little vignette if I want to. And now I'm going to dodge the horse's head. So I'll go back to the dodge tool here. Oh, my exposure between 25 to 30. And I start tapping on the horse's head. It doesn't need to be much. If I start dodging too much, it's going to distort the image. So it's just some subtle clicks. You get that, and then let's turn that off and on. So now there's the one below it, there's the one above it, and as you can see, by burning around the edge, I create a vignette. By dodging the middle around the horse's head, I lighten the horse, and by doing that, I heighten my focal point of the image. If I want, I could go back down into the adjustment layers, and I can do some fine tuning of the image. I can go back up to levels now, and throw levels on the entire image. I need to turn that eyeball off. I like how that's just punched it up a little bit. The other thing I like, selective color. In selective color, I go and pick neutrals. And then I sometimes just increase the blacks of those neutrals a little bit. You can increase the yellow, or you can sort of zone in on some colors there. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, it just tweaked it a little bit. And let's actually go into the blacks of the selective color and then crank those blacks up. When I'm done, I like to shift select everything, control, and flatten image. And then you can save that image as whatever you need to.